And as I often do, I kind of review my notes, and towards the end of the talk that I planned, there are three obstacles in a way to wonder and curiosity, and I thought I'd bring those up at the beginning. And I realize this is a whole other talk that I hadn't planned, but it's a bit of a talk. So what are the obstacles and obstructions to wonder and curiosity? So the first is prejudice. I remember once, I'm going to forget his first name, there was a broadcaster, his son is now on Fox News, Wallace, but it was Wallace Sr. used to do interviews. And I was flipping channels. I was a young, maybe college or high school kid at home. And he was talking to some guy who, when I looked at him, looked like a kind of maybe homeless hippie at the time. And I almost didn't stay on, but I was a little bit curious as to what might this homeless person have to say that this Wallace interviewer thought was so valuable. So as I listened, it started to make kind of serious sense. And slowly it came out that his name was Fritz Perls. And I don't know if at the time I already knew, but later I certainly knew that Fritz Perls was the originator of a whole branch of psychotherapy called Gestalt therapy. And he was very bright, controversial, but he certainly had some things to say about human nature and human beings and communication. So I had some wonder and curiosity, and certainly benefited from that. Second obstacle is thought, and this is a big one. We all have thoughts about ourselves and our reality and what we should be or think we're actually experiencing. I don't know why, but this particular incident really stuck out in my mind, where I was at a retreat, and it was a place where we gathered for dinner. And my thought was, I don't want to go down and mix it up with all those people, and that's not what I want to do. I don't want to be with all those people, and I just want to stay in my room. And then I just sort of took a moment and felt into, well, what do I actually want? So I want to go down there and talk to people. And it was really clear I wanted to go downstairs and mix it up. But I had this story about what I was about, and I could have gone with that story. Then there's another big one in terms of obstructing our knowledge of ourselves and obstructing wonder and curiosity. And it's really a big one. It's emotional denial, where we're really not in touch with, in a way, maybe true emotion, or any emotion. Some of us get stuck in a emotional stance of, I'm higher than everyone else. I always have to be on top. I can't possibly fail. And this kind of emotional stance of, I'm just king of the universe. Rambo, Rocky. I'm great, invincible. It's a kind of an emotional denial. And some of us are stuck in, I'm lower. I'm always going to be a kind of failure. I always need to defer to others. My opinion doesn't count. And it's denial because we may not even know that we're kind of stuck in a pattern. I just started looking at a book by a woman named Galit Atlas. It's called Emotional Inheritance. And the book is dedicated to multi-generational trauma and the way that parents and grandparents, great-grandparents, traumas affect us. And one of the most interesting things in it that she's talking about is our not knowing. So it's a not thought. This is stuff that affects us, and we don't even know we're being affected. And it may be controversial, it may be hard to believe, but the more I live my own life and the more I work as a psychotherapist, the more true I see some of this to be. And I had a recent instance of this in my own life, which is actually very poignant for me and touching. So when my father was growing up, his father came to the United States when my father was 7 years old and left my father in Poland. So my father was without a father from age 7 to 14. And then my grandfather brought the family over. It's only occurred to me within maybe the last year or two that my father never talked about growing up. Period. Nada. Nothing. I never heard a word of Polish in the house. I never heard, when I was your age, XYZ happened. When I was 12, this is what happened. When I was going to school, this is what happened. When I had friends, this is what happened. When I didn't have friends, this is what happened. These are the books I did or didn't read. Nothing. Never hit me. It never even occurred to me. It was just this absence. And part of what this woman, Galit Atlas in Emotional Inheritance, is talking about is that there are these blind spots of history, emotional history, that our parents and our grandparents, it happens a lot in families, didn't share, protected us from, intentionally or unintentionally. And that ends up affecting us in sometimes very, very inexplicable ways. And it's profound. It's quite profound. It's mysterious, but I offer it up just as another way in which we may be obstructing ourselves from knowing ourselves and knowing how things have affected us, and to have an openness and wonder and curiosity. And what's the surest countermeasure to this, or an antidote, is actually, what's it like in your experience right now? What's it like in your experience right now? Even if it's not clear what my experience is, that's also an experience. You know, how is that for you not to be feeling something? How does that affect you? Just to be open and curious. What's it like? You know, many of us in our culture are outwardly directed. We're concerned about what other people think, what other people feel. We, in a way, live in other people's minds about us. We don't pay that much mind to our own experience, to our own feelings. We may be feeling bored. We may feel empty. We may feel numb. We may not know what we feel, but that's more honest than I think I should feel, or I guess I feel. Just what's it like to feel numb? Where do you feel numb? Is it okay to just acknowledge that I feel numb and I feel this kind of hollowness? This is what you're all about. Wonder and curiosity. So that was the add-on lecture. That's the lecture that I planned begins. So many of us are drawn to Buddhist practice to reduce stress and to achieve a sense of calm. And that was certainly what drew me to practice. Young age of about maybe 17, 18, 19, I was already quite aware of my own obsessive rumination and really, really pained by it. And when I learned that meditation might be an avenue for dealing with that, I was something I really wanted to be involved with. So we may be drawn to meditation because we have a need to quiet down, to be calmer. And maybe with some practice we find that maybe our bodies calm down a little bit, but maybe our minds calm down a little bit. And if you hang around Dawn Mountain, if you start coming to our first and third Tuesdays, you start learning that there's a lot more to the practice of meditation than just calming down. And calming down is very significant, very important for most of us. And there's a kind of an epidemic of sympathetic arousal in our culture, where most of us get dysregulated a lot. And so anything that can quiet us down is very helpful. But if we get more involved and learn more about Buddhism, we start hearing about things like bondage and liberation, and talks about compassion, ways of thinking about bondage, ways of becoming free, ways of encouraging and developing compassion. And this summer, in our first and third Tuesdays, and then into the fall, we're going to be talking a lot. We're going to kind of be introducing a large framework of Buddhist teachings, basic Buddhist teachings. And if we encounter traditional Buddhist teachings, it's very, very important to have wonder and curiosity. And we'll be talking about how we encounter material coming from foreign tradition, different language, different countries, different era. You know, one way to deal with things that are foreign and strange is just to segregate them and really not touch them. And I'm always pickled to remember, that word came out by accident, this incident I had in a New York basement Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, you know, if you've gone to Chinatown in New York or San Francisco, there are these great little dives. You have to go downstairs and they're kind of funky, and I was sitting there, and this one was a particularly small one, and there was this menu on the wall, but I saw some people eating some stuff that I'd never seen before, and I asked the waiter or waitress, "What's that?" And it was some sort of either pickled or curried, some kind of cucumber something, pickled or curried cucumbers. It was a Cantonese restaurant. I said, "It's not on the menu." And they said, "Oh, you people don't like it." So there was the "you people don't like it" way of kind of segregating out something that is foreign and different. They should come to Houston. I mean, there are so many foods that you people don't like that I think we're ending up eating in this very metropolitan, food-rich environment. So one way you don't want to deal with things that are really, really foreign and strange is just, no, we don't do with it. Goodbye. But also, we shouldn't be blind adopters just because somebody says this is the case. We shouldn't become parrots and start going around mouthing, this is what Buddhists believe and now I believe it. Da, 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 da. Really, we need to be looking at our own experience. This is very, very famous. The Buddhist teachings are called sutta or sutra. And there's a little bit of controversy as to what the origin of why they're called sutras. But sutra actually is cognate with what we use in English, suture, thread. So the sutras are threads of teaching. Sometimes people say, well, they're describing threads that were used to tie together books. The difficult thing about that is most of the sutra occurred when people were just learning the teachings by heart, and they were conveying them by heart. They weren't writing them down, and they certainly weren't threading them with thread. So it's more like a thread of a teaching. So the famous sutra called the Kalama Sutra in the Theravada tradition, where the Buddha is really telling these people are wondering, what should we believe? How should we proceed? And Gautama Buddha is quoted in the following way. Now, Kalamas don't go by reports, by legends, by traditions, by scripture, by logical conjecture, by inference, by analogies, by agreement through pondering views, by probability, or by the thought, this contemplative is our teacher. When you know for yourself that these qualities are skillful, these qualities are blameless, so you know for yourself something actually feels positive. Something feels blameless. These qualities are praised by the wise. Well, you're taking that into account, but it's these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to welfare and to happiness. We try something. We may be willing to try something for days, weeks, months, and years. But it's got to make some personal, experiential sense. Personal, experiential sense. Then you should enter and remain in them. So really, we want you all, when you're studying, practicing, and encountering material from a Buddhist tradition, does it affect me and those around me in a positive manner? And be sober. Be clear about your own experience. It's so, so important to be clear and honest about our experience. Religious practice and spiritual practice really is a challenge. There is an aspect of it which is calming, centering, beneficial that way. But, there was a philosopher in the 19th century, 20th century, his name was Edmund Husserl, and he said we all have a natural attitude where we just kind of, take it for granted that, this is solid and it's external and whatever. Science as a whole is a kind of questioning of a natural attitude, which is, this seems indestructible, but if you study science, you start understanding it's made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of, God, so many particles and pieces at this point. And they ultimately don't have much solidity. So he questioned the natural attitude. And recently at a lecture by Jeffrey Kripal, who was a professor of religious studies at Rice, he said that, spirituality and religion is oriented to making the familiar strange and the strange familiar. So while meditation is oriented towards making us calm and centered, as we teach on our first and third Tuesdays, we will be presenting material that is strange. It's different. It's couched in language that's different. Sometimes the ideas that Buddhists have about the universe are quite different from the way we view the universe. So as I was looking up, I wanted to see if there was a citation for this strange, familiar, familiar, strange. I came across a Wikipedia article on defamiliarization. This is actually an artistic movement started by an artist in 1917 named Shklovsky. He's writing about art, but he really could be writing about spiritual practice. Poetic speech is formed speech. Prose is ordinary speech, economical, easy, proper. The goddess of prose is a goddess of the accurate, facile type of the direct expression of a child. This difference is the key to the creation of art and the prevention of over-automatization, which causes an individual to function as though by formula. There was an author writing about Buddhist practice whose name, modern author, I'm going to forget right now, but he characterized Buddhist practice as leading to de-automatization. So this is where the familiar starts to become strange. If we start even doing simple meditation on the breath, I thought I knew what my breath feels like, but as I focus on my breathing, it's got a different kind of sense to it. I may not even be able to put words to it. I'm curious. And then I may start feeling things in my body and my mind that are a little bit unusual. Maybe a pleasure that's unusual. Maybe a rest that feels different. The person, Shklovsky, went on to say the author's purpose is to create the vision which results from that de-automatized perception. A work is created artistically so that its perception is impeded and the greatest possible effect is produced through the slowness of the perception. I don't know that I could find a better description of part of what we do in Buddhist practice is to slow down our perception. And with the slowing down of perception, we start seeing things newly. and can begin to consider things from a fresh perspective. One author who I really enjoy is, her name is Marina Abramovich. She's a performance artist, and she does, startling things like sit at the Museum of Modern Art and have people come and sit in front of her for an hour or minutes, whatever it was. She doesn't get up all day to pee, and she just stares at people. And she did this for months. Talk about de-automatization. And she says that, there's this kind of spiritual effect of her performances. They are, behavior breaking. They are not expected. And this does something to not only, the person who's doing it, the person who's participating, but also to the atmosphere. The witnesses seeing this are affected. When we meditate together, we are all affected. Part of the process of what we're doing in cultivating meditation is bringing curiosity, just go back to the title of this little talk, curiosity and wonder to our experience of the simple act of breathing. Can we just focus on the breath? As I say, on the first and third Tuesdays, we're going to be starting this Tuesday, we'll be starting a whole longer piece of teaching on a kind of an overview on the Buddhist path. And there'll be a lot of interesting material. There'll be some material that's unusual or you haven't heard of before. And we'll talk about how do we relate to, how do we work with, how do we consider such material. The ultimate goal of all of this is to bring us home into our own experience. So our own experience ultimately is free. Our own experience ultimately is open-hearted. Our own experience is tender. And so when we can get less oriented towards the outside and more oriented towards what's happening inside, there are riches available for free that are wonderful. And so I'll take a very short pause here. We have a morning talk on the first Sunday of the month. We have a little talk from 10:30 to 11, and then our meditation begins at 11, which is just a few seconds. Thank you all for coming this morning. It's good to see you all.